reality. We can easily get entangled in our concepts and views, as he called them. Zen, a later form of Buddhism, traces its origins back to this theme in the Buddhist teaching. In Zen, words and concepts are obstacles in the pursuit of enlightenment. The goal of Zen is awakening to reality without the imposition of our beliefs and preconceptions. My favorite Zen proverb says it all. Open mouth, already a mistake. Although the Buddha proclaimed good news, like Jesus, his message of freedom from suffering was not about grace or a gift from God. Like the path of knowledge in Hinduism, the Buddha's middle way required discipline and effort. Because we are the cause of our own suffering, only we can free ourselves from it. The Buddha admonished his followers to strive with diligence, because the Buddha only shows the way. In Noble Truth 4, he shows the way with an outline of this discipline. In later discourses, he explains each component. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path. That is right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The Pali word samma is correctly translated in this passage as right, but it means more than just true as opposed to false. It also suggests that which promotes the end of suffering. So each element of this path is intended to contribute to the end of suffering, and short of the realization of nibbana, a favorable rebirth. These 8 parts are interrelated, so the practice of one supports the practice of the others. The Noble Path is not a program in which the practitioner completes one step before moving on to the next step. Rather, all 8 elements are pursued concurrently. The symbol of the Noble Path is an 8-spoke wheel, which suggests that traversing each spoke from the outer circle to the inner hub leads to the same goal, nibbana. The Buddha's strategy is to address simultaneously all the factors contributing to dukkha: the illusion of self, misknowing reality, desire, craving, attachment, self-centered behavior. The 8 components of the Buddha's discipline have traditionally been divided into 3 sections. There's study, conduct, and concentration. For this reason, the Noble Path is sometimes called the triple practice. Now, I'm going to give these divisions somewhat more descriptive designations and call them, respectively, cultivating wisdom, developing moral conduct, and disciplining the mind. And we'll discuss each of these in turn. It seems almost counterintuitive for the first part of the practice to be called cultivating wisdom, since wisdom is actually the aim of the Eightfold Path. But there's good reason for this. The Buddha recognized that it requires some measure of understanding to begin the practice of Dhamma in the first place. When the Buddha set in motion the wheel of Dhamma, he began by explaining the idea of the middle way and the Four Noble Truths. At the beginning of the Buddha's regimen for ending suffering, this is what right understanding means. One becomes acquainted with the basic principles of the Buddha's teachings by study, discussion, and reflection. But as I've emphasized all along, concepts take you only so far. Eventually, the Dhamma must be understood in a deep way that comes only at enlightenment. So to emphasize this point, I'll distinguish between two kinds of right understanding. The first is the result of study and reflection on the Buddhist teaching, the glimmer of truth that the practitioner sees that prompts him or her to take the path at the outset. I'll call the second awakened understanding, to indicate the wisdom that one attains at the end of the path. At the end of the discussion of all the components of the path, we'll return and talk about awakened understanding. Right intention bridges right understanding and the next division of the triple practice, developing moral conduct. Essentially, right intention is the determination to follow specific virtues, to neutralize our conditioned tendencies towards greed, hatred, and harming. The countervailing virtues are non-attachment, goodwill, and harmlessness. To aid in practicing these virtues, one contemplates the suffering connected with worldly pleasures to assist in establishing non-attachment to these pleasures. One also contemplates the desire of all beings to be happy in order to generate a feeling of goodwill, and on the wish for all beings to be free from suffering in order to establish the virtue of harmlessness. Developing moral conduct, the second part of the triple practice, is a major part of the Buddhist path. Unlike other religions, moral behavior in Buddhism is not commanded by a God who issues specific orders for human beings, nor is it commanded by the Buddha. The Buddha understood morality to be rooted in our very natures as persons. We ought to act morally because it is our nature to be compassionate. In this respect, the Buddha's teaching approaches that of his Chinese counterpart, Confucius, who encouraged people to be good because goodness is the fundamental goal of human life. Furthermore, observing moral conduct is necessary to alleviate our own suffering. The basic principle of karma, which the Buddha accepted like other Indians of the axial age, meant that causing others to suffer would eventually result in suffering oneself and would, of course, perpetuate the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha did modify the prevailing view of karma, however, by insisting that karma is generated only by intentional acts. This difference is rooted in his view that the source of karma is the aggregate of mental formations, the idea of desire and intentions. The best way to discuss the moral dimension of the Buddha's teachings is to start with what he called right action. Right action is epitomized in the 5 precepts, one of the most important practices for all Buddhists, no matter the sect or whether one is a monk, a nun, or a layperson. In many Asian countries, learning the 5 precepts is one of the Buddhist child's first introductions to Buddhism, and they remain the foundation for living throughout one's life. The 5 precepts are aspirations, they're not commandments. They're ideals that one vows to live by. When practitioners fail to live up to these ideals, they simply acknowledge the failure and promise to do better the next time. Reciting the precepts regularly, often in schools or other assemblies, recognizing failure, and endeavoring to try harder helps one to cultivate the necessary qualities to live a moral life. These foundational precepts essentially follow the principle of non-harming, or ahimsa. The first precept states this principle as a promise. I will refrain from harming sentient beings. Sentient beings are those